Welcome to all the panelists for this session on groundwater. My name is Amani Al-Farra, and I am a water officer at FAO in the Land and Water Division, and will be your moderator today. We have a very exciting hour in front of us. Please let us know in the passable chat box who you are, where you are joining from. During our session in the chat, you can also put any question you have for the speakers, and we will take a few of them towards the end of the session. Please let us know if there is a specific speaker you would like to hear from. With this short introduction, I'd like to give the floor to our first speaker to open the event, Abu Amani, who is the Director Division of the Water Science at the UNESCO. UNESCO, together with IGRAC, leads the coordination of the World Water Day 2022 on behalf of the UN Water. Abu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Amani. Dear colleagues, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you are connected. And thank you for making time to join us for this event. The upcoming World Water Day 2022 will raise awareness on one of the most hidden and precious resources of the planet, groundwater. Since its designation in 1993 by the United Nations General Assembly, the World Water Day has been celebrated on 22nd March every year. Next year, the theme of the World Water Day 2022 and the World Toilet Day is groundwater, making the invisible visible. So why is groundwater so important? For many reasons. First, groundwater provides almost half of all drinking water worldwide. Second, groundwater also provides roughly 40% of water for irrigated agriculture. And thirdly, groundwater provides about a third of the water supply required for industry. But not only that, groundwater also sustains biodiversity and terrestrial ecosystems. And also, groundwater is a strategic resource and an important component when it comes to strategy to adapt to climate change. Increasing demands for water in responding to the needs of economic growth are rapidly increasing the pressure on groundwater. And we have been observing serious depletion and pollution in many parts of the world. It is therefore critical that we address opportunities and the risks around groundwater in order to achieve SDG 6 and the Agenda 2030 on sustainable development. Despite its important role, groundwater is often out of sight and mind of many people. Groundwater may be invisible to us, but it has a direct impact on our daily lives. Indeed, we are heavily depending on groundwater and use it every day. The World Water Day and World Toilet Day in 2022 will therefore show the need to make the invisible visible, especially in terms of making policy. The next World Water Development Report will also contribute towards raising awareness of these precious resources, as the theme of the report will be also on groundwater. UN Water has assigned UNESCO and IGRAC to jointly lead the coordination of both the World Water Campaign, together with the other UN members and partners, and the UN Water Groundwater Summit, which will be hosted by UNESCO at its headquarters in Paris on 7 and 8 of December next year. It's hoped that messages which will be gathered throughout 2022 and during the summit on the importance of groundwater in achieving SDG 6 will inform the 2023 UN Water Conference. Individuals, researchers, governments, NGOs, civil society, private sector, indeed, the entire international community need to make groundwater more visible. We need to work together to ensure each and every country is capable of assessing and sustainably managing its water resources. UNESCO, together with all the UN water members and partners, are counting on you all to engage actively in our effort to make groundwater visible in 22 and of course beyond. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Abu, for the nice and interesting introduction. With no further ado, I would like to give the floor to Michaela Melto, who is the coordinator of the UNESCO World Water Assessment Program, to present the forthcoming UN World Water Development report that UNESCO published on behalf of the UN Water. Michaela, please. Michaela, you are muted, please.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mani. So back again, dear participant colleagues, good afternoon and good morning. I'm here to raise your interest for the next edition of the World Water Development Report. The purpose of the 2022 edition is to put groundwater in the spotlight. Why UN Water has decided to focus specifically on groundwater in this edition? For a number of reasons, and some have been already pointed out by Abu. The first, and maybe some of you don't know it, it is because groundwater represents 99% of all fresh water resources on Earth. Then, because it is an invisible resource, hence hard to measure and hard to manage. It is still a large untapped resource, and very important, its values grows with climate change as well as with increasing population density. It is hence of critical importance to call attention on the role of groundwater in the context of all water resources development and management, and in particular of adaptation to climate change. Next, please. The different parts of this report will provide an overview of the present roles of groundwater in the various sectors of human activities and in sustaining freshwater ecosystems. It will also report on the challenges due to its often unsustainable exploitation and on the different regional perspective on groundwater. The report will also, and most importantly, highlight the opportunities that groundwater presents to respond to the growing water demand and for enhancing water security globally in view of the climate change uncertainty. I will now walk you through some of the highlights of the report. Next, please. Groundwater is ubiquitous. It can be found at depths of few meters as well as down to depths of kilometers. It is, however, not homogeneously distributed. Look at this map. It is very clear. It shows that the distribution of groundwater in the world contains in both shallow and deep aquifers. Major groundwater aquifer systems are shown in blue and in green color. In brown are the areas characterized by shallow and local aquifers. Next, please. Excessive exploitation of groundwater is one of the major concerns, and this has more than doubled during the last 70 years. The graph shows the evolution of total groundwater withdrawal in selected countries in the period 1950-2020. The graph shows the tremendous groundwater abstraction growth in India, followed by the US and China. The total global groundwater withdrawal during 2017 is estimated at 959 cubic kilometers, of which 68 correspond to the countries that are shown in this graph. Next, please. The three main groundwater users in human societies are agriculture, human settlement, megacity, rural villages, towns, and industry. And they are addressed in different chapters. The graph shows the level on groundwater dependencies that this sector have in selected countries and compare it with the abstraction for irrigation, for agriculture only. For example, in India, the largest groundwater user globally, 89% of groundwater abstraction out of the total of 251 cubic kilometers per year is for irrigation. Similarly, in other countries like United States, Pakistan, Iran, Bangladesh, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia, the amount of groundwater abstraction for irrigation is between 71 and 92%. Next, please. Freshwater ecosystems are the other major groundwater users. Groundwater-dependent ecosystems support the critical ecosystem services. Aquatic and terrestrial GDE provide habitat, support biodiversity, buffer floods and drought, and provide food. They also provide cultural services of recreational, spiritual, religious, and aesthetic values. Next, please. Groundwater is less impacted by climatic variation and may present great opportunities in terms of climate change adaptation and also mitigation. Groundwater-based adaptation to climate change exploit the capacity of aquifer system to store seasonal water surpluses, which have substantial lower losses due to evaporation than the conventional infrastructures like the dams. The importance of groundwater as a vital buffer to climatic variability will become more and more important in the coming decade. This is particularly true for the groundwater-dependent small island developing states. Next, please. Groundwater can also help in climate change mitigation, as I said before, thanks to low carbon geothermal energy. What is geothermal energy? It's heat stored in groundwater that can be transferred to the surface and transformed in electricity or used directly for heating, cooling, or other uses. Next, please. I extracted quite an interesting case from the regional section on Africa, whose subsurface contains large groundwater resources with an estimated volume 100 times larger than the estimated of all annual renewable freshwater resources in the region. So this means that future climate trends could affect Africa's surface water supply, but might not decrease groundwater resources due to the dependence of a recharge of intense rainfall events, which are forecasted to increase in the future in Africa. Next, please. In terms of opportunities, 2 words on groundwater in transboundary context. It can become a catalyst of multi-country cooperation. As of today, 366 transboundary aquifer with a surface expression larger than 5,000 square kilometers have been identified. The sustainable exploitation of these huge resources requires coordinated actions, and information exchange among the countries that share the resource. Next, please. Finally, to exploit the full potential of groundwater at the global level, the imperative is the sharing of knowledge on the subsurface and the dissemination of successful practices and policies for groundwater sustainable exploitation and efficient use. With this, I hope I have raised your appetite for the upcoming 2022 report. Save the date for the launch of the UN World Water Development Report on groundwater, which will be on March 22, 2022 at the Dakar World Water Forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michaela. We are looking forward to the report and congratulations on the important and complex coordination work. Every year, this report is a key component of the World Water Day campaign, and it's much used to reach for a complex, for example, policymaker and their advisors. To reach other audience and for the overall communication framework, I would now like to turn to Stefan Sipman, the communication specialist at ICRAG, to present engagement opportunities and the overall campaign. Stefan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amani. And thanks, Sarah, for sharing the presentation. Okay, so I will today discuss the World Water Day campaign and how you can get involved. Just like last year, also this year, we're going to follow the 3 basic principles. One being getting inspired, informed. Please go to the next, Sarah. Yes, perfect. Getting inspired, and third, take action. So let's get informed first. Next slide, please. Thanks. So groundwater as the 2022 theme. What is it about? Groundwater is obviously very complex, but we decided to focus on 3 main elements. One being the groundwater quality and the risk that pollution can pose. The second being over abstraction and the risk it has on groundwater quantity in some regions, but also the groundwater potential, which it has for other regions where surface water is not or not enough available, sometimes also caused by climate change and the droughts as a result. So why should we care? Because groundwater is the most abundant source of fresh water in the world, not only being used for drinking water, but also for sanitation, agriculture, and industry. So what now? We have to manage, so use and protect groundwater resources in a sustainable way, which will be one of the main messages to the policymakers during this whole campaign. This all is the backbone of our campaign. Next slide, please. So, time to get inspired. Although the 2022 campaign materials are not yet available because we're currently working on them, the products will be more or less the same as the one of this year, the 2021. So we'll give posters. There are social media kits, including banners and cards with messages related to groundwater. And we will have certificates that you can personalize for events that you are organizing yourself and to give to the participants. So speaking of events, next slide. World Water Day this year is more than just one day. It's broader. It's for a full year. The World Water Development Report that has been mentioned by Michaela will be launched during the World Water Forum, which will be held in Dakar. And on that day, it's also going to be the pivot event and main celebration of World Water Day, along with all other groundwater related sessions that will be held there. Later that year in November, the World Toilet Day will also follow the exact same theme. And finally, the Groundwater Summit will be held in Paris in December to conclude this year in which we focus on groundwater. Next slide, please. Thanks. Another way in which you can get engaged in the whole campaign is the Groundwater Catalog. This will be a Wikipedia-style product tool that we're currently developing, for which policymakers can look at for topics related to groundwater and see which kind of measures could be used related to those topics, and also which services are involved. In order to do so, I would like to already invite all the scientists and people from the groundwater community in this exact same call to contribute in the upcoming year, because at the World Water Forum, we're going to launch a first edition of this. Thank you. Next one. Other ways in which you can be engaged in the campaign. Let's take a look at some examples from the past. In 2014, when the theme was water and energy, a school teacher from Nigeria, from a more privileged area, decided to take this theme and show his kids from his class how you can develop solar-powered water purifiers. This in itself is already an inspirational example of how you can take the campaign and make it your own. But he even took it one step further, because afterwards he went with the class to a less privileged area, and the purifiers were handed to kids of the same age group for them to use. Another example was in the Netherlands. It's an annual event, which is the Walk for Water. Kids fill their blue backpacks with 1.5 or 6 liter bottles of water, not only to get the awareness themselves of how it's like to have to walk for miles with water to get your daily supply, but also to raise donations that later on are being invested in water-related projects abroad. There are also other ways in which you can be engaged. Yes, thank you. Of course, to join our social media campaign that we will launch, you can organize webinars or trainings related to the groundwater topic, make a photo context to literally make the invisible visible. Or, for example, IAH, Dave Kramer, who will be later involved in this session, can explain it even in more detail. But IAH will, at an event, invite everyone that is coming to bring a groundwater sample from their own region. They will mix it, and then they will either irrigate crops, or they will infiltrate it in the groundwater in the area itself, just to raise more awareness on the topic. But please feel free to be as creative as possible, and let us know by including World Water Day hashtag in your communications. Please let us know if you have any questions or if you have any ideas for the campaign. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for the presentation. For our participant today, please know that you can always reach out to Stefan and UNESCO and UN Water Communications colleagues with ideas or outreach synergies. With no further ado, I would like now to welcome our great panel members who will give us different perspectives on what we need to do about groundwater, and talk a bit more about the issues from their different perspectives. We have with us Dave Kramer, who is the president of the International Association of Hydrologists, Vivian Ree, who is associate professor at the University of Pisca, and Mushood Tijani, who is the groundwater and the climate change lead at Africa Ministers Council on Water. All of them experts with extensive experience. I would like to start with one quick question to take the temperature of our panelists. What is your #1 priority when it comes to groundwater? And mainly, who should take actions to change the current status? In short, what and who? And I'm looking for 2 words or a very short sentence, and we'll go in this order: Dave, Vivian, and Mushood. Dave, please, can you start by what is your thinking on this issue?
Hello, thank you, Amani. I would say that one of the critical issues in groundwater has already been mentioned: transboundary aquifers. There's over 350 transboundary aquifers in the world. And as Michelle said, they could be a catalyst for international cooperation, but they could also be a source of conflict and advancing political ambition. And I would say who, as far as that, decision makers, policymakers need to get agreements. There are very, very few agreements on transboundary aquifers.
Thank you, Dave. Vivian, what do you think?
Thank you. Well, to me, I think the priority should be to re-establish the priority between people and groundwater, so that to see people not only as the source of the problem, but also part of the solution. And this will mean to be more inclusive towards local knowledge, marginal communities, and the gender perspective.
Thank you, very interesting. Mashoud, please proceed.
Yeah, thank you. I think I will be looking at it from the perspective of Africa. The number one priority regarding groundwater would be to have adequate and reliable information and data in respect of mapping and characterization of the aquifer. This will definitely be a precondition for better understanding and the need for sustainable management of groundwater. And the deliberate effort could be from the government at all levels to invest in human and capacity development. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. Provoking thoughts and very tempting to think again. Thank you all. Now I would like to take this discussion a bit deeper and would like to ask Dave to reflect on the following question. At the IAH, you bring together hydrologists. What is the biggest challenge you encounter when using the power of the collective? Dave?
Yes, the International Association of Hydrogeologists is the largest groundwater organization in the world. We have thousands of members in 130 countries. We have regional vice presidents, we have national chapters, we have a scientific journal, we have commissions and networks that work on individual problems. We've been around, we're celebrating 65 years of existence, and we are a scientific, educational, and charitable organization. And in that collective, we have many, many challenges, but I think one of the most important ones is education. It's already been mentioned that groundwater is somewhat invisible to the general public. And so one aspect of education is to encourage people to understand the importance of groundwater, and even school children. Another aspect would be for political scientists, for decision makers to understand how groundwater interacts with industry, with agriculture, and as I mentioned before, transboundary aquifers. But I think one of the things that's neglected a lot of times within our own organization is there's a growing gap between scientific advancements in groundwater from academia and from businesses and industry, and the actual field practitioner. The field practitioners very often are not aware of the latest advances, and some of them use inappropriate methods and things that are not optimal for groundwater development and management. And so that gap is getting larger, and that's actually a professional educational difference. And so those are the sorts of things in education and groundwater which are a constant challenge to us. We try and address that through videos. We have a strategic overview series for decision makers. And so we're trying to advance in that area.
Thank you, Dave. Very interesting stakeholder engagement, multidisciplinary approach, all of that is very exciting. Vivian, please, the floor is yours on the following question. What are you excited about in terms of current research on groundwater, and what do people need to know? Vivian.
Thank you, Mani. This is a very challenging question, but I think it's a quite interesting moment for all those working in the groundwater section and the sector. And I think that actually the exciting thing is to contribute to make the invisible visible, as it challenges us to be creative and think out of the box and find new way to shed some light on this resource. And to be more specific in terms of research, I think it's interesting to see emerging so many interdisciplinary collaboration that try to address new challenges, for example, for a better understanding of deep groundwater, hydrology, the hydrogeology of the oceanic floor, emerging contaminants, including microplastics that so far have not been so addressed, for example, in the groundwater sphere, let's say. But then there is also groundwater forensics, and then all the advances in groundwater monitoring, and probably even more has to come, including perhaps extraterrestrial hydrogeology. And this is really interlinked with the fact that groundwater has the inter and multidisciplinary nature that is linked to every single aspect of our daily life. And this interdisciplinarity is actually what allow us to, and groundwater specialists worldwide, to really follow their intellectual curiosity in many directions, thus to contribute to advancing the understanding of this resource. And finally, I think something that is quite dear to me is to see the increasing development of transdisciplinary approaches like socio-hydrogeology, that encourages us to better explore as I was saying before, the reciprocity between people and groundwater, and therefore to consider how people are affected by scarce or polluted groundwater. And this can be done by integrated local knowledge and social sciences into hydrogeological and hydrochemical aspects. Because I think we can explore while we understand the dynamics of groundwater, we can also assess the feedbacks and the interaction that people have, and thus we can embed in our solution local knowledge, risk perception, the tradition, the history, and thus provide solutions that are more in line with the urge to produce more inclusive approaches and thus contribute decolonizing science.
Thank you, Viviane, for this very interesting information, which seems bridging what Dave just said, and the local knowledge and the integration between different sectors, and the need how to convey the message to the policymaker. For this, I would like now to take the floor, to give the floor to Mashoud and ask him what the main policy threats are to groundwater and what is being done about it. How can we accelerate the process? Mashoud.
Thank you, Amani, for the question. And I think, again, I will want to focus on the African continent in this respect. Key policy threats to groundwater include weak governance system, poor institutional capacity, inadequate human capacity, apart from the environmental issues like contamination of groundwater, impact of climate change. These are threats that are affecting groundwater and hampering the effective capacity for sustainable utilization of groundwater resources in Africa. In terms of what is being done, I think globally, a lot of effort has been put together try to raise the awareness of the groundwater. And one of it is this World Water Week plan campaign for groundwater to make visible invisible. But in terms of at the continental level, AMCO as a regional body, as a continental body in charge of water resources, within the mandate to support member states to develop and manage and utilize groundwater resources, identify groundwater as one of the key elements in a strategic program. And recently, there is a number of efforts that have been started in this respect, and that led to the establishment of Groundwater Desk and the development of a program that we call Groundwater Program in AMCO, which we call APAGO, which is aimed at strengthening the institutional capacity of groundwater governance through human capacity development in Africa. We want to leverage on science and technology in improving the sustainable utilization and management of groundwater resources. So AMCO Groundwater Desk is also strategically positioned and technically to pursue this objective in collaboration with regional bodies to do that. UNESCO is one of our great partners, including IGRAC, in this respect, in trying to make sure that we put together institutional capacity, policy, tools for groundwater management, in Africa and how to enhance the overall capacity. And how can we accelerate this situation? I think the only key answer I want to say here in moving forward is that in terms of to accelerate the project, there is need for a strong political will and commitment of the respective countries in Africa in terms of raising the profile of groundwater in Africa. Apart from that, we need the partnership and collaboration with international organizations and partners. Of course, donor agency and relevant government or international organization need also to invest a bit in education, increasing finance, technology, know-how transfer, and so on. These are things that we need in African setting to improve the understanding and sustainable management and utilization of groundwater resources in Africa. With this, I want to take a pause. Thank you.
Thank you, Masood, so much. This is very hugely interesting to reflect the perspective from science and Dave, the multidisciplinary to a case in Africa in total. So thank you so much. We will now take a few questions in the chat box, and if you haven't had time to put them in, there is still time to do so. Please also put if you would like someone in particular to address your inquiry. For this section, I will give the floor to Daniela from UN Water Technical Advisory Unit. Please, Daniela, take over.
Thank you so much, Imani, and thank you to all the panelists and the participants today. It's really great to have all of you here. We've had a few comments and questions in the chat box, and I am going to address the first one perhaps to Dave, since he was the one who spoke. But whilst I do that, maybe all the panelists, so Mushood and Vivian and Dave, could think about one question that Daniel had. So Daniel Diaz asked, what's preventing investment in large-scale groundwater infrastructure development? That's a really big one. What's preventing investment? But if you have a think about that, all of you, I'm going to start with a question to Dave. So you were saying that practitioners are not aware of the latest advancements and the gap is getting larger. So when you were saying this, I was thinking, what do we need? We need more professional education, but then what is blocking it? And where can a campaign like this help remove or at least make those blockages a bit smaller?
This is a very important question, Daniela, and thank you for that question. There are several reasons why investment is not very, very high. And one is the obvious thing that groundwater is invisible, and that's what one of these sessions is about. A lot of people don't realize its importance. A lot of decision makers don't realize that it's important. That's why in education, I mentioned something that the International Association of Hydrogeologists has called the Strategic Overview Series, which are papers that are 2 to 6 pages long on different groundwater topics, groundwater and climate change, groundwater and mining, groundwater and different sorts of industry. So education is part of that to make sure that people who allocate the money are aware of the importance of groundwater. But I think another aspect of that is the efficacy of how funds are used. Sometimes money can be applied, funds can be appropriated to different countries, but they're not efficiently spent. Sometimes the allocation of money is not as effective as it could be because the system is not set up to really advance groundwater resources and the money's not used optimally. So I think those are the two factors that I would say are the most important in why insufficient funds are given for groundwater resources at this time.
Thank you. So that's also answering, of course, the investments in large scale groundwater development. But I was thinking also what you're saying now with these papers. I mean, that's something so practical that we can actually use for the campaign and make that available online for everyone. I mean, in this call, we have lots of participants who probably have their own networks. And that's the beauty of these campaigns, that it's not only IGRAC and UNESCO and UN Water, everyone doing the campaign, but it's all of us together. So for everyone who is participating in this session, go to the World Water Day website when it will be up and use the material there. We'll put the ones that Dave mentioned there. I think that's a great way to try and minimize those gaps. Thank you, Dave. I'm moving over to Viviana. We had a specific question to you from Jenny at Siwi. So she wants to know, she is saying pertinent points regarding the need for a better interdisciplinary approach to groundwater resources and aquifers. And I think that what we can connect this to is you're talking about how to make sure that these two connect. And if you're talking about it right now and you're excited about it, also probably means that not everyone is super excited about it. So I was wondering, how do your colleagues react? And maybe the more technical colleagues, when you talk about the need for interdisciplinary approaches, I can't even say that word, we probably need to find another word. When we say that, when you talk about that, how do they react?
Well, thank you, because this is a very interesting question. Okay, we can stay hours talking about this, because actually the first reaction was not really, well, not from everyone, but I had some interesting comments saying that it's not important we are scientists, we need to do science, full stop. We need to be practical, provide data and provide some answer to problem, which is true. But I think that keeping an eye on I always say that we have to look around the well and not only focusing on the well itself. If I can give a sort of example, it's really important to know why we are studying, why we're providing answer and trying to address some issues, because in the end we don't want just to publish a paper, but we want people to have better access to safe water. We want people to be able to access to safe sanitation and so on and so forth. So and then the experience is that maybe I can talk a lot about that, but then when you see in practical terms that actually it is effective to spend some time discussing to people, learning from local knowledge, how to embed the local know-how in finding the solution, and it actually provided something that is more effective than people understand, the colleagues also, and people in general understand that. But in the beginning, many people were skeptical, and I think about my colleagues, in the field, not my colleagues per se at the university in general. But now I see that there is much more interest into that, because we can see that it's actually working.
Thank you. Yeah, that's hugely interesting. And I'm going to turn to, after I ask a question to Mushud, I'm going to turn to Michaela Mileto to see if you recall when we worked together in 2019 for the UN World Water Development Report on leaving no one behind. To me, that was such a perfect example of this interdisciplinary approach. And maybe we can pick this up from your perspective of preparing the report and coordinating what those main challenges are when we talk about those approaches. And maybe that can also help us when we map out this campaign. So I'll get back to you. So why don't you have a think about that while I turn to Mushud. And you were talking about the strong political commitment to improve understanding of the sustainable management of groundwater. And to me, of course, not in Africa, in the region, it's sort of hard to understand what is blocking, like from a day-to-day perspective and from a day-to-day work. What would be like a regular day in your work when you're talking about this? What do you say? Do you have any super successful examples of how you convince policymakers of your work and the importance of your work? And I was thinking about the World Water Development Report and how that is a tool for the campaign. Is there something else that you use when you do your work? And how can a campaign like this help in your work from day to day?
Yeah. Hello. Yeah, thank you. I think it's a nice question. I think the awareness is serious, is what we need. And that is one of the objectives of this campaign that we are trying to project here. So a lot of effort at the continental level is going on, but day-to-day influence is just to see that we leverage on all this information that we have to make sure that the policy and governance structures in African countries, mostly Sub-Saharan Africa, is well in tune with the information that is available so that that awareness is created. At AMCO, we have been doing a lot of that with the launching of the groundwater program, trying to have information passed to the member states. Currently, we have what we call the focal person in each country, who are the TAC member within the General Assembly of the African Ministers Council, whom we are liaising with on a regular basis and providing information on the need to understand that groundwater need to be given a profile of recognition in the development agenda of the various countries so that we can ensure sustainable and long-term management of the groundwater resources. More so that the bulk of the African rural community are dependent on these groundwater resources, as I mentioned initially, not only for drinking, now increasingly, even in the urban area where the public water supply system is failing. So there is this proliferation of the in-house borehole drilling in many urban centers, not to talk of the fact that we need this groundwater system for small-scale holder irrigations in Africa to boost food security. So I think a lot is being done in this regard, trying to create the awareness for the policymakers. But as being said, I think the key thing, which Dave also mentioned, is about education. And the education, to also get this education informed, we need knowledge. And the knowledge can only begin if you enhance the capacity. So that's why we are of the opinion that in the African context, capacity development is key. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moshood. We also have here a couple of questions that are coming in now. And I'm trying to find out if there's anyone in particular that they want to ask. Daniel, you're asking about if there are any case studies of utility scale groundwater development. Hundreds of wells developed accessing deep aquifers and major groundwater basins. Any one of my panelists feel particularly compelled to answer this question? Or should we let Daniel answer who he would like to see respond to that? I see Dave, he's starting to click. No, he's not. Yes, he is.
Well, yes, that's an interesting question. There are case studies available on all continents, and some of that is in the literature. Where I live in the southwestern United States, we've had a 20-year drought. And so groundwater management is very, very important. The city in which I live for 30 years has done managed aquifer recharge, where we take surface water and we put it underground for storage for later use. But you'll see examples all over the world. I'm personally involved in a project in Africa, in Niger, Africa, where we're actually using satellite imagery to help identify groundwater resources, to identify also the amount of groundwater in storage. So there are a lot of studies that are very technical as far as how much water is available, how we can manage that water without over-exploiting it, and considerations also with socioeconomic considerations as far as population growth and other things of that sort. So there's not just one source, but there's several. This is in the literature. We have a journal which is probably one of the highest impact factors of any groundwater journal, called Hydrogeology, and there are constant case studies in that journal. But there are many other journals as well where these case studies can be viewed, and the techniques for groundwater management can be also seen. And so that's a very, very good question. Thank you.
Thanks for answering it. I'm just going to go back before we continue with another quite technical question. I'm just going to go back to and sort of close off the loop with Michaela about the transdisciplinary approach. In 2019, remember when we worked on that theme? Do you have any thoughts there on, just in a few words, on what we can do for this campaign to make sure that that link is ensured?
Yeah, Well, you said 2018, but you remember that there was also 2016 with water and jobs. Nobody was saying, how can we put together the two dimensions? And the good part of 2016 water and job and 2019 was the social aspect. There was a very big focus on the social aspect, so it was easy to also to incorporate into the report and hence into the campaign. The difficult part here is the fact that it's ultra scientific. The groundwater is traditional, ultra scientific discipline. People talk about groundwater are generally very focused are practitioner on groundwater, and even they don't speak with the others. So it could be a big challenge. The idea to have a communication campaign is of course fantastic, because we need to explain to everybody the invisible resource. And this is the difficulty, because there is also a kind of fantastic element that we can take into consideration. And maybe we can use this fantastic element of the invisibility, especially for young people, for kids, to explain what is the groundwater, what is the water that is beneath us, and how we can use and make good use of it. So yeah, I have no recipe for the moment. I'm not a communication person, but I am a groundwater person. That's why I'm not able to do a good communication. But I rely on you and on Stefan, all the other guys that are working very much on this aspect.
Thank you, Michela. Okay, so we only have a couple of minutes left for this segment. So what I would like to do, because we have a really nice last question to the panelists and to all panelists. And what I'm going to suggest to Amani, who is the moderator, if she will allow me to, is that I will ask one question to Mushood, which is in the chat box, and then you can take over and you can ask the panelists to finish off with this question. I'll put this to you in the chat box so that you have it. But before we do that, Mushood, you have a direct question here in the chat box, which is around that you have identified, you refer to the need for reliable information and data for Africa. What can you identify as the biggest hurdles in this context? And where do you see the most urgent need for action? And you have already answered just now. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that we can then leave it there. Thank you. So why don't we do that? Amani, if you have a look in the chat box, you have a question to all panelists about gender-related dimensions.
Can you share it with me, please?
Yes, no, but maybe it's actually more, it's easier maybe if you allow, I can just ask it and then I will leave it to you. Yeah, okay. So for this segment, thank you so much to all panelists for having answered all these questions. And if you see anything else in the chat box that's unanswered, please go ahead and take a moment to answer them there. So this is the last question to all the panelists from Nina, and it goes like this. What are, in your view, the main gender-related dimensions to consider when planning for sound groundwater management and monitoring? So Amani, over to you to manage this question and the panelists. Thanks to all.
Who would like to start? I think who highlighted the gender perspective was Viviane. So please, Viviane, can you start the discussion?
Yes, of course. This is another topic that is quite dear to me, and well, for sure, all the panelists, but I know also Michela is working a lot in this field. So, like to start, I think the key is to get acquainted with the gender dimension and to know the role that women play in when groundwater is at stake. So, and this can span from all the domains, from women in science, then to women that collect water, manage water in the household. So just for example, if we talk about sociogeology, so the transdisciplinary dimension, if we perform public engagement, I think it's crucial to perform and collect gender disaggregated data. And this WAP, UNESCO WAP has a lot of materials for that if you want to have more information. So I think to get acquainted with that from local perspective, I think is quite important. And then if I can add just one last thing, when work is at stake, just give voice to all the people, like marginal groups, women, and try to be as broad as possible in inclusion.
I want to be sharp and short. David, do you have a word? Because we have very limited minutes left. So please, one word if you have any. Dave?
You know, from a personal standpoint, when I've been out in many countries, I see young girls carrying water great distances. And what this means is they can't get education that is affordable to other people. And so it is really a very, very deep question as far as development of the world. And so the idea of gender is an important one that's linked with groundwater and groundwater development. And so that's about all I would have to say. It's a very, very important issue.
Mashoud, do you have any, thank you, Dave, and do you have any word to say on gender? As we have very strict, I know, Michaela, you have a hand, but I am tight in time. Mashoud.
Yeah, thank you. I think, as you said, to me, I think to summarize, education, knowledge, and informations are needed for sustainable development of groundwater resources. And all this involve collaboration, involve partnership, involve financial support, especially in the African context. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Michaela, forgive me, I have to proceed. So before going the floor, before giving the floor to Nino Kikrek, who is the director of IGRAC, one of the coordinator of the next year World Water Day, I would like to thank everyone for the great session. From FAO perspective, we are happily involved in the campaign in the writing of the UN World Water Development Report. On our work as FAO, we work at national, regional, and the global level. As Abu highlighted at the beginning, 40% of the groundwater is for agriculture, 70% of the total water for agriculture. So agriculture create job for different kind of job, and it's off-farm employment. So it has an impact of agriculture and the groundwater from quality and the quantity aspect. Yet with no further delay, I would like to give the floor to Nino Kikrek. Krish, sorry, sorry, you know.
Doesn't mind. It's fine. It's fine. We are running out of time, and I will just round off this very exciting session with a few words. Maybe I should start with the last question. The last question was about education and gender issue, and someone said, how we can save this planet? And his answer was education, education, education for the girls. And that's something which I personally support in any aspect. Well, you know, sometimes I get a question why groundwater needs extra attention. Well, imagine that there is no rain ever. Imagine there are no rivers, there are no lakes, seas, and oceans. It's impossible to imagine. But then, well, imagine that there is no groundwater. And then you ask, what? Groundwater. At the same time, half of population in the world drinks that groundwater every day. So that's obvious reason why we need more attention, why groundwater needs more attention. Well, there are also some, research-based data. Recently, there was overview and showed that more than 40 UN agencies and affiliate organizations deal with 65 various groundwater-related topics. So groundwater is actually everywhere, from wetlands to food production, from health and sanitation to fighting climate change. And why we're doing this, starting with this session, and then in the next whole year, is to join the forces and to better clarify and emphasize the role of groundwater as a vital resource. So we will have World Water Development Report, as outlined by Michaela. We will have a catalog of groundwater management. We will have a special groundwater session during the World Water Forum, and also high-level panel dedicated to groundwater in Africa. And finally, we will have a summit at the end of the year. But this summit will be actually very much related to outcome of all important events during the next year. Well, unofficially, I can call it Year of Groundwater, with the World Water Week, with the IH Congress. All of these will be used to actually as an input to the summit, unifying the international community efforts towards achievement of SDGs and jointly preparing for the UN Water Conference 2023. To conclude, groundwater may be out of sight, but it shouldn't be out of mind. So let's make it invisible, maybe not to our eyes, but to our mind. This is closing of this session, but the beginning of our actions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nino. Sharp, to the point, and with that very short time. With this, I would like to conclude our session. And thank you for all the audience. Thank you for the participant. Thank you for the presenters. Thank you for the panelists. Have a good day, everyone.